My glorious Globetrotters, today I want to talk about a topic that I've talked about a couple times in the past, but like they say, those who don't respect history are doomed to repeat it. And I believe that we have really reached a pivotal point in terms of how we use, appreciate, and look at primary ammo type weapons. Now, I don't want to go too off on a history tangent here, but I do feel like it's worth noting a little bit of the backstory of these primary weapons and just their role in the sandbox over the years. As we know, vanilla Destiny 2 was garbage. Double primary sucked. Luckily, Forsaken gave us the ability to have special weapons. For that matter, you could equip 2 of them, even back then. But for quite a decent amount of time, there was what we called built-in juggler. Now, I don't want to go too in-depth to this, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw up a screenshot that'll explain it better than me. Essentially, though, there was a good period of time in the game where if you just had 2 special weapons equipped, you were just naturally going to create obscene amounts of heavy ammo, and this really came into effect and play and into the limelight during Lightfall. It had gotten to the point where it was so bad that you were legitimately hurting yourself, your team, and your gaming experience if you had on a legendary primary weapon. Why? Because you just had way less heavy ammo, and in a rocket meta, you wanted all the heavy ammo that you could get. Luckily, by Season of the Wish, legendary primary weapons didn't feel nearly as bad in terms of your ammo economy, and they very much so felt usable. From Into the Light and to the final shape, I would say primary weapons were in a decent spot, but with things like the Indebted Kindness and how rocket pistols worked with their massive ammo reserves and creating their own special ammo very fast with ammo finders, you could still get away with running double special, as during Onslaught, I primarily was rocking things like a Supremacy and the Indebted Kindness. However, where things got really interesting in my opinion was around the time of Edge of Fate, aka whenever all of our stats got big time changes and the weapon stat was introduced. Not only that, but we got introduced to one of the strongest special weapon archetypes of all time, being the special rocket pulse rifles and Mint Retrograde dominating your kinetic slot. And for that first month or so of us really trying to relearn the sandbox, understand the stats, the intricacies, where you want to sit with certain stats, it didn't take too long for the realization of the weapon stat being so dominant in so many builds, and essentially allowing you that if you have a decent high enough weapon stat, you can very much so get away with just running 2 special weapons as long as at least one of them has somewhat decent ammo economy. And what's crazy is that you can get away with this without even having to use Special Finny, which is a mod that I lived and died by before the Edge of Fate sandbox changes. Now, I'm not saying Special Finny isn't as good as it was. It still serves a use in like some crazy solo raid boss encounters or some really difficult challenges like that where you really need the gobsmack amounts of special ammo. But realistically, you do not need to run Special Finny hardly at all anymore. Especially if the encounter you're in has enough amount of ads, there's zero reason for you to ever have to run Special Finisher anymore, and your ammo economy is still going to be so strong. Especially with weapons like the lightsaber that can make its own ammo, you just have a lot more options in running a double special loadout and not really feeling the struggle, especially with how strong some of our ability focused builds are. For example, Buddy Build Warlock, Consta Titan, Skullfort Arc Titan, Ascension on Hunter, hello, Combo Blow. There's just overall not too many instances where you have to put on a primary, and in a lot of hard content, having the ability to run 2 special weapons is very beneficial, because in content in which you're very underleveled, bro, running a legendary primary, you can feel it just being really weak and hitting like a wet noodle, not doing much for you whatsoever. Like, legitimately, take a moment and think about it. When was the last time you were using a legendary primary weapon consistently? Obviously, you can use one in content in which you're on the same level as the enemy. Everything dies there anyways. But in content in which you're underleveled, even if it is by just a little bit, primaries really do fall off, especially if they don't have a damage perk. For me, personally, I can tell you the 2 primaries that I have used predominantly in the entirety of Renegades, one of which you can't even get anymore, the Eartight Apex. That is a very unique situation where a weapon is just loaded on a perfect archetype with just so many god tier perks all over it. Add in the fact that it's order trait, like the Yeartide is a anomaly. It is an outlier, not the standard. And there's a reason why you can't even get this weapon anymore. It's a solstice weapon and it is that good. The other weapon that I've used is a freaking Unforgiven SMG, which is from the Duality Dungeon. Yeah, I used a damn near 4-year-old SMG in the most recent contest mode content, which was day 1 Equilibrium. And the only reason I did that was for chunking, but in hindsight, I totally could have gotten away with just running around with the choir in second encounter. I was using Finality's Augur because I was kind of learning how to chunk in that contest scenario right then and there. But even then, it has Demolitionist and Frenzy, so it kind of paired and fit well in there, but I could have totally just used the choir of one in a mid retrograde with an Eager Sword or an 86 and been fine. Like, you just do not ever really run into a scenario in which you need to run a primary or it's actually beneficial. The only other legendary primary weapon I can genuinely get behind people using is the multi-mock that Banshee is still selling, because that is attrition orbs and kinetic tremors. That is once again an outlier, not the standard. That weapon will make you so many freaking fracking orbs that'll help you gen your super, and if you're doing solo witness, it fits perfectly in there for that specific setting. But in terms of general play, why would I ever use a primary? I don't need one. You don't. Invest in the weapon stat, which you could argue that or the super is the most important stat in the entire game. Put on special ammo finder, or at least one copy on your helmet, some weapon font mods. Dude, you're going to be living the high life on ammo economy. And if you pull up to another contest mode activity with a weapon stat of lower than 100, you're off the team, Brody. This is something that I really feel like we always run into every now and again, and it kind of gets on my nerves because I don't like putting on a weapon that I enjoy when I know it's actively making my loadout just a little bit worse. Especially with weapons that have such good ammo economy. Like, dude, Choir of One, there's a reason why it's like overall looked at as one of the top 3 best exotics in the game, period. It's a special weapon with the best ammo economy out of, it holds up to 225 rounds. It has great major DPS, and it can just one-shot most low-tier red bars anyways. Legendary primaries are generally used to deal with rank and file enemies, but when we have ability focused builds, special ammo weapons with amazing ammo efficiency, the only way you can find yourself using and justify using a legendary primary weapon is for very specific play styles. I know I'm gonna have some Peacekeeper Titan mains coming at me in the comments. That's different. Once again, that's different. The Fast Talker SMG, that's different. Blaster weapons are entirely different. They just inherently do more damage than their non-blaster counterparts. I haven't even mentioned area denial frames. When looking at it in a vacuum, just about 90% of all legendary primary weapons are flat out useless. Straight up. You're either using Yeartide in your energy slot, if you're using a legendary primary there, or the multi-mock in your kinetic slot. At that point, so much of the loot in the game almost becomes irrelevant, because primary weapons just inherently play second fiddle to any other legendary in the game. And when the game is out of legs to stand on and it's down to its nubs, having such a large majority of the loot be entirely obsolete doesn't bode well for the future health of the game. So how do you balance running double special and making primary legendary weapons good? You don't want to nerf the special weapons into the ground or their ammo, because then that just makes the community pissed off and feel like they're handcuffed because they have to use a weaker alternative now. But instead, you have to give them very specific and special perk combinations, maybe a little damage buff, that makes sense for them to get used, because the general reload perk and damage perk SMG does not cut it anymore. It does not. It needs to do more. What we honestly need are more legendary weapons that have splash perks and damage perks with decent reload speed. Like, if I could have an SMG with incandescent and chaos reshaped, or destabilizing rounds and chaos reshaped, now we're looking somewhere. Or even just destab and frenzy, like just something simple that will get primary weapons used. I briefly skipped over the reckless oracle. That's another one I would consider an outlier. Okay, that's like what, 4, 3? That's not good enough.